Bills fans throughout this season have fallen in love with Kyle Pitts. And like Matt said, it's not happening. It's just not. There's no scenario.
Or what?
Yeah, no scenario where that's going to happen. But are there any other prospects in this year's draft that Bills fans should keep an eye on? Or should they just stay with Dawson Knox in terms of what we've seen out of him in his first 2 years compared to everyone else in that draft class? He's not really – he's in the top 3, top 4 in terms of production in that draft class right now. So do you bring in a veteran to bring him along for one more year and then hope that he continues to develop? Or is there maybe someone in this draft that you think would be a nice compliment to Dawson Knox?
Before I answer this, you guys mind if I kick you guys a question? Because
I love it.
I did on Locked On Bills today. I did my performance review on the tight ends, and when I listened to Brandon Beane talk about the tight ends, I thought he put them on blast. I mean, he straight up said, we never got to the point where defenses were concerned about our tight ends going off. Dawson Knox started the year inconsistent. And he said specifically, I wish we had a guy like Travis Kelce. I mean, why would he say that if he wasn't very serious about putting these guys on notice and potentially making a significant move at tight end? Matt, Ryan, did you guys get that same feeling, or am I reading too much into that?
No, I agree. We actually talked last week about a guy like Kyle Rudolph if he becomes available, a guy like Zach Ertz if he's available. He obviously not Travis Kelce
right.
Because guys like that don't come around very often. Yeah. But if you can bring in that veteran that can be that contributor, that can put those guys on notice, that can push Dawson Knox, I think you have to do it. And I'm not saying Greg Olsen would have done that last year, but that's why the Bills were in on him.
Yeah.
That's why there was legitimate interest in Greg Olsen. And Olsen has even said it was kind of down to Seattle and Buffalo. So who knows what would have happened there. But no, I agree. I think he pretty much said, listen, I need more from this position. Because if we did get a difference maker there, boy, this offense would even ascend to another level. And that's kind of a scary thought.
Yeah.
Listen, this is a very pro Brandon Beane podcast, and for obvious reasons. I mean, to watch the job that he's done over the last 4 years. I mean, it's hard to poke a lot of holes in anything that he's done. But one thing I will say about this in particular, to your point, is that I also kind of sit back and wonder, well, did you have some weird expectations of Dawson Knox to be a Travis Kelce? Because I never had those. I know Josh Allen was super pumped up about Dawson Knox going into this year. I remember all of his interviews. I think one of them was with us in one of those Zoom press conferences talking about all this hype around Dawson Knox. I'm like, all right, I'm excited to watch the Dawson Knox show. I wasn't until you guys started pumping his tires a little bit, not to this level. And so I'm wondering how much of a disconnect is there between what they think he is and what he can be, because I don't ever think he's going to be in that Travis Kelce world, but maybe, I mean, we're still early on in the process.
So I really like Dawson Knox. I recognize he has a lot of room to get better. This is not a hot take. It's going to sound like a hot take, but it's really not. Now, Dawson Knox is one of the most athletic tight ends in the NFL. I mean, physically gifted, he's cream of the crop. There aren't guys with his size, his athleticism, his explosiveness. He's 90th percentile in terms of athleticism testing and size. He was a high school quarterback. He went to Ole Miss. He transitioned from quarterback to tight end, and he's in this offense, this Phil Longo offense that doesn't even care about tight ends. And they've got DK Metcalf, A.J. Brown, Elijah Moore, Van Jefferson, DeMarcus Lodge. I mean, they're not throwing the ball to Dawson Knox. He didn't even catch a touchdown. So he enters the NFL with 1,100 snaps in his life at tight end. And guys that play tight end their whole life have a hard time coming in and making an impact in the NFL at tight end. Much less a guy that played quarterback in high school and played in a system that, was really just kindergarten for tight ends. So now he's going to the NFL. He winds up being the Bills' starter as a rookie after missing a month of training camp in preseason, right, with that hamstring injury. Drops galore as a rookie, blocked pretty good, showed some flashes. This year, he comes in, you're expecting him to get better. He winds up actually reducing his drop rate pretty significantly. And over the last 9 games, I mean, he caught like 29 passes and 5 touchdowns, including the playoffs. After his first 6 games, he had 8 catches for 109 yards and no touchdowns. So once he got past COVID and the concussion and the calf, he wound up being a pretty good player for the Bills. Now I understand like there's still some inconsistency there. He had a couple fumbles this year. He still had some drops that, were routine catches that he should have made. And then he'll make some dazzling catch along the sideline and he reels you back in. Like, I get it. He's inconsistent, but I'm in love with the ceiling. I think he's got a really high ceiling because of his physical traits to develop into a meaningful player. Now that's going to have to happen. And I want to go back to one more guy. Let's talk about Logan Thomas, right? Logan Thomas was the quarterback at Virginia Tech. He goes Arizona, he goes to Buffalo, he goes to Detroit, not really doing much, right, in terms of production. Look at this guy this past year with Washington. He was really good. He had big-time numbers. He's like 6 years finally into playing tight end. He finally had a decent year. So, like, this takes time for these guys to develop. And because he's so physically gifted, it gives me a little bit more longer of a leash to be patient with this guy. Now, with that said, we're talking about a team that wants to go to the Super Bowl. So you know, like how much you want to bank on that. I get the apprehension. So if Brandon Beane's serious about this tight end stuff, Kyle Pitts is going to be a top 10 pick. He's Darren Waller 2.0. But then there's two more guys that I think can make an impact next year. One of them's Pat Freiermuth from Penn State. I think he's kind of an all-around guy. I don't think he's a plus blocker, but in terms of being physical, being able to stress the middle of the field, work the seam, be that reliable guy that's going to, be that real, like you call him a security blanket for the quarterback. I think Pat Freiermuth can be that. Now, if you're looking for an F tight end, a guy that's going to move around the formation, play some H-back, flexed out in the slot, a lot like what the Bills do with tight ends, Brevin Jordan from Miami. Again, he's not a traditional inline guy. But if you want that versatile guy with athleticism that can really present a mismatch in terms of, size and athleticism down the field, but good after the catch, that's the guy. That's the guy, Brevin Jordan. I don't know if you take him at 30, and he's kind of like one of those guys that you love to take, in the 40 to 55 range. So the Bills are kind of in no man's land, I think, for appropriate value. But if you think you got to get that X factor, that dynamic difference maker that presents another layer that makes defenses a little concerned about what you have at tight end, I think it's got to be Pitts, Freiermuth, or Jordan if you're looking for something to help you next year.
One quick thing here, Ryan. I'm just looking at the stat comparisons, and because I guess it's a little bit unfair to sit here in year two, to your point, and say and kind of put a ceiling on Dawson Knox, because he really hasn't had the kind of opportunity that I think a guy like Travis Kelce or George Kittle have had to kind of gain their success. Like, one of the big things I think in both of those offenses at the times when they kind of made their jump was the opportunities. I mean, we're talking about, 80 plus targets for Travis Kelce in his second season. Dawson Knox has about 80 in his first 2 years targets. So I think that as he kind of becomes more reliable, and not only reliable in catching the ball, but reliable as in staying healthy, that target share is going to start to rise. And if they don't bring back John Brown and they have some issues with, finding another weapon, if you will, he can maybe be that guy with a greater volume of looks. And I think, to your point, listen, you kind of reeled me back in a little bit on the Dawson Knox hype with your monologue there. That was some pretty good stuff.
I like traits. I like guys that have physical talent, because when you do that, like, there has to be a ceiling for you to, like, be able to make an impact. There has to be something that makes you difficult to deal with. And a lot of times that's physical traits, that size, athleticism, power. And, like, Dawson Knox has those things. And so I have a longer leash. I admit that. I might be like a bit of an apologist with him, and I recognize the inconsistency, but I think there's enough physical skill there that gives me some optimism that he can be that guy. And again, like, he is one of the most physically gifted tight ends in the NFL. And if you look at the last 9 games that he played, 2 touchdowns in 3 games in the playoffs, I think there's something that he can do there. And again, like, you have to ask yourself, what type of offense do you want to be? The Bills had 501 points and had the 30th, like the second least amount of catches from tight ends last year. Like, they're not a tight end centric offense, just like with the running game. Like, all right, well, we wish the running game was better and the Bills offense would be better if they ran the ball more effectively, but this was the number 2 scoring offense, the number 2 offense in terms of yards. Like, are these important factors to your script and why you win football games? You want those things to be better, but they weren't. I mean, they were still 13-3 and went to the AFC Championship game. Is that going to be the difference? Maybe, but they still were really good without necessarily having a Kelce or a dynamic rushing attack.
No, that's a great point.
Let me tell you one more thing about this. While this is on my head, the Bills are a wide receiver offense. They had the most catches and the most yards amongst wide receivers this year of any team. And they were the second team in yards was 433 behind the Bills. So when you look for the tight end production and the running back production in terms of catching the football, it's made up right there. They just get the ball to different players, but they still produce elite levels of offense.